The Phantasmagorium Show is proud to present Money, Murder, and Minnesota, a retrospective and review of all things Fargo. Season 5 Fargo. Last week was a lineup of Lindas, and now we have a ream of Roys. The award-winning Coen Brothers executive-produced and Noah Hawley run FX series of Fargo is what we are here for, so let's go. Kat is here, I am Scotty R37, and Steve is chained up in the shed. What's going on, Kat?
Not much.
Some startling developments this week. We are on our third to last episode. There are spoilers, so if anybody is not watching along, please watch the episode and then come back. Or just watch along and see if our analysis lives up to the episode. We've been gushing essentially, like so far this whole series.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're spoiling with malice. We're spoiling with love. But it is we're still dangling a little bit as to the events of last episode with the visit to the Lindas and the puppet show as to whether or not that was a reality. I think we're getting a couple of clues that maybe not.
Well, we know that it literally didn't happen from last week.
See, and it's funny because I was talking to my mom and she was like, so we have to watch that again because I have no idea if that happened. And I was like, I don't think it did, but if you want to watch it again, we can. And then we watched this week's episode and she was like, I don't think last week happened. And I was like, good. So
some of the things did, but yeah.
The Linda and the trippy the puppet show and the process of creating your puppet. I think that will go forward into sort of the psychological transition between Nadine and Dot.
Yeah.
Which works thematically, but this has been far more I want to say esoteric than the first season where everything was pretty much straightforward. And this one is delving into more of the psychological. And I'm hoping that it does. And hoping is probably the best way. I'm not going to say I'm certain, but it looks like that we are getting that more psychological, esoteric, abstract storytelling this time around, which I'm for.
Yeah. This is definitely also, despite having good characters, is a more plot-driven season than other previous ones. And of course, they've been leaning into the absurd, as they do further this week as well. Despite some of the crazy things you've seen in some of the other seasons, this is definitely its most absurd one yet. And you'll find out what I mean by that when we watch the other seasons. But it's like, it's like this season's a different animal.
Well, and it's interesting that you said, because going into this, you said that Noah Hawley was going to lean more into the comedy.
Yeah.
And I don't find that it's leaning more into the comedy, but again, more into the abstract, as you said, which is, I'm still here for it. It's great. I like it.
Oh, yeah. And this episode has one of the funniest scenes in the whole show, in the whole series, almost, just about.
Well, and when we get there, let me know. I don't know if we both found it as entertaining, because a lot of the humor on this particular episode made me terrified and almost justified in the tag at the end, that because so far there have been a couple of episodes that say if you or anyone you know suffer from spousal abuse, contact this number. I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'm not doing my due diligence in that regard.
It said that on when you saw it on TV?
Oh, yeah.
I was watching the purchased stream, so it just went straight to the credits.
Oh, no, it does the credits, and then after, I think, directed by or created by, then there is a sort of public service for people who are suffering in such a way, which that's how even if something funny happens around Roy Tillman, I don't think it's going to work out well for anybody, especially if he is on the receiving end of that joke. If he's the butt of the joke, someone else is going to pay for that humor.
Exactly.
Quite literally, a couple of people do pay for that. I do want to say hello to the chat. The Phantom Organist. Hello, Phantom Organist. Who says hello to Steve. Steve is chained up in the shed. So, and thank you so much. Steve's not here, man. Only Zool. Also, Herc130. Hello, Flyboy. Says, I'm all caught up and saw tonight's episode. Very interesting. I thought so too.
Hey, Herc. Nice to see
And
you.
Lemon is here. Lemon.
He
Good
says,
evening.
yes.
Absolutely.
And yes, Lemon Pie, we will definitely rank all the seasons of the show when we finish, because we're having a blast.
Yeah, we were actually just discussing that briefly before.
And we'll rank it alongside the movie as well.
Of course. And that'll be fun. I'll probably cap off once we're done all 5 seasons. I'll probably cap it off with a rewatch of Fargo and see how it all holds up. But I'm having a good time watching Fargo. I'm enjoying the actors. I'm enjoying. Oh, there was comeuppance this week. I'm enjoying everything about it. It's reminding me of the heyday of when I was watching, and oddly enough, another John Hamm show. But I'm liking my stories when it comes to Fargo. It's a drama, but it does have the humor that keeps me invested, and the characters are thoroughly interesting. Like, I enjoy all of this over the 2 seasons that I've seen so far, and I can't wait to see more.
Yeah.
So shall we get into the legal paperwork that is the Graves?
Yeah, this is the first joke of the episode, which I thought was really funny, where Danish Graves, it looks like he's at Lorraine's mansion, and she has a leather-bound embroidered book cover that says Debtors of North Dakota. And I love that she treats this with that kind of reverence, that she just keeps almost like its own Bible on hand. And yet when Danish opens the book, you see all the simple grid, cheap paper, cheap notepad type paper in it, which I thought was a funny juxtaposition. And he's scrolling through, and we're seeing the names, and some of the names were kind of ridiculous as I was catching them. And
one guy's name was Sasquatch.
Yeah, one guy's name was Sasquatch. Like, what? And he ends up looking through he picks out some debtors that he's looking at. And you have the title card as, yes, we, says DJ Play Nice. As he then goes to the courthouse, and they have like take a ticket type situation. And the digital screen says 313, next place 313. And he comes up there and he gives her, the Danish gives her the folder of paperwork. She goes through it. And he's like, you'll find that all the proper notary and has been authorized, and all the signatures are there. All the paperwork's there. She's like, okay. She stamps it and all this kind of thing. And then she's like, 314. And he's like, also me. This has also been notarized and authorized. And she looks at it. She's like, sir, there must be some kind of mistake. Oh, no, it's a mistake. It's proper. It's not a mistake. Both people are changing. Yeah, actually 3. And then you see 3 guys stand up behind him. And he's like, and they're like, howdy. And they're like, huh? And she's like, are you sure, sir? Yep. Here's the paperwork for that one. All done. And she's like, okay, and we're not really sure what it is. I suspected what was going on, that it had something to do with Lorraine's threat of buying the election, but I wasn't really sure where they were going with this. But I thought, okay, we're seeing Lorraine's plan probably coming to fruition. But then we cut back to the hospital where Dot and Roy are at the checkout desk. And he's basically surprisingly calm while he's talking to her. He's trying not to make a scene. And he's like, sign it, Nadine, and that kind of thing. So she signs the paper, hands. Oh, hello, Sherry.
Hey, Sherry.
And
good to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting because even then, like, Dot she's no Shrinking Violet, and so she's saying, I can't sign this because I'm not Nadine Tillman.
Right.
I'm Dorothy Lyon. Dot. And he's like, you want to start something? You want to make this bad? I will pull my sidearm. And it's really like John Hamm is rather terrifying because I don't know when he's going to go off.
Right. And she ends up signing the document and gives it to the nurse, who kind of hesitates for a second. And Roy's like, what's up? So he grabs the paperback and sees that Dot wrote for her signature, help me. And then Roy just starts tearing it up slowly and talking to the clerk because he recognizes her. and infers that, oh, your brother, he got out of prison recently or whatever, and I heard they got early release or something. Well, I could change that and send him right back to prison type thing. He's being very calm about it. And why don't you print up another one of these, a nice clean copy? And so she does. And then Dot's kind of nervous. And so this time she signs her actual name. And then we see finally making his first appearance after 3 consecutive absences. State Trooper Whit Farr walks in, helping somebody into the ER. And he sees Dot standing there with Roy, and he kind of recognizes her. She turns around briefly to see him, and she's kind of nervous. And Roy's going to start, walking her out. And Whit stops, and he's trying to ask what we're doing here. And she's like, oh, it's fine. Everything's fine, because she doesn't want it to escalate. And Roy's like, yeah, see, she said everything's fine. We're going to get going. He's like, oh, yeah. And he doesn't want to tell Roy where he recognizes her from, because he doesn't want to, rip the Band-Aid off, so to speak. But before this confrontation can get any further, Gator and the 2 other thugs come in. Like, is there a problem here? And, oh, no. And then Gator touches Whit, and he's like, swipes him immediately. He's like, don't touch me. And he's like, oh, and Gator's like, oh, a little sensitive or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Dorothy mutters under her breath to Roy, if you hurt him, I will never go with your doing. I will make a scene. It is not going to go well. So Roy just, even though he was reaching for his sidearm, like Whit was reaching for his sidearm even, Roy just calms it down. He's like, no, we're fine. Everything's fine. We're leaving. And she lies to Whit and says, no, everything's good. It's fine. I'm just going home with him. It's fine. And he could tell it's not fine. And that she's basically trying to tell him, I'm in trouble, but let's not escalate things here, because these people are crazy. Yes. And they walk out of the hospital, and Whit just standing there.
Well, and she's still playing off that she was never kidnapped in the first place when she met Whit in the let's call it the quick stop. And so she's still saying that never happened. I was never kidnapped. And she's making her claims still. And it is very much to protect the people who are around her. And later on, when we get Gator and Dot talking to each other, it's an interesting, this didn't have to go this way if you weren't so damn sloppy. But we'll get there when we get there. I want to say hi to Cinema Gulp. Hey, Ben. Hey, guys. This season sounds interesting. Super interesting.
Oh, very much so. Very, very tonally all over the place, but in a good way.
Yes.
So then Roy takes her back to the barn, or back to his property, takes her in a barn with a chain attached to a shackle on the floor, has her chained there, and they're in the chair, and he's talking to her about how, oh, you swore an oath and marriage, all this kind of stuff. And she's like, well, you broke my collarbone, you broke my jaw, beat me, all this kind of thing. And he's like, well, you're running your mouth and that kind of stuff. And they're they're going back and forth on it. And she tries to appeal to him by saying, well, look, I'm not who you want me to be anymore. That's not me. And I don't know where you expect this to go. It's never going to change. And she mentions, what about my daughter? I have Scotty. And then she tries to appeal to him in a weird way, saying, oh, I'm running all the Girl Scouts. I'm running their troop. And, oh, Scotty, I got to get the Christmas presents, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, lady, he doesn't care about that. Like, what? He's not going to cave to this. And he kind of rolls his eyes that she's even saying these things. And before it gets too far, his new wife, Karen, comes in, and they bring in like a bed, crappy mattress on a wireframe bed, and bring in like a bucket to piss in, I guess. And
bottle of water.
She's like, yeah, in a puddle of water. And then she kind of makes Dot makes like a comment, and Karen slaps her. And Karen is strangely cool with the situation almost. Like, she doesn't seem to know where this is going either. She's just kind of fine with it. She's like, come on, honey, we need to go to the big sheriff's debates today. And he's like, yeah, okay, you better, tells Dot, scolds her again, you better think twice about blah, blah, blah. And then they all leave. Leaving Dot there in the barn, and she immediately tries to go about making a makeshift weapon, like a crowbar or hacksaw, to start sawing through the chain.
Well, that was one of the things that she was doing in the hospital when she signed the paper. It said "help me," and that's why they ripped it up, and then tried to steal the pen. And he was like, "No, you're not taking any weapons with you."
Yep.
And so when Whit comes in, that's when she steals the paper clip. And that's how she used it, because it's like a little loop hook thing that she can pull out, and that gets almost like a flat, it's just a flat brace for a cot, and she gets it out and she starts trying to do stuff with it, and we're hoping it works, but we switch perspectives and we go over to our Minnesota police officer, don't we?
About this time, yeah. So Indira is arrives home from her shift,
Hmm.
and she goes into the bedroom, and her husband's in bed, and he's acting really guilty, and she doesn't seem to pick up on it. I picked up on it immediately, and she's getting changed because she doesn't have much time before she has to take another shift and just wants to get a quick break. And then he tries to stop her from going into the closet, and then she opens it, and there's of course some topless woman in there, and and the lady's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and she's like, "Well, what do you have to be sorry for other than betraying women everywhere?" Which is a weird line. I'm like, no. And then she criticizes the
Ah!
husband, but then she criticizes the husband, and lays into him again. You're just useless. You don't do jack shit around here. You don't pull your weight. You don't do anything. And he's like, and he strangely doesn't fight her back on this one because he kind of like knows he's been caught. And so she just tells him off and says, "Look, you better be gone when I get back for my next shift." And so she just gets in her uniform again. She doesn't even want to be in the house. And when she goes out in the front yard, she sees that a tow truck has come to repossess her car, her personal car. She's like, wait, trying to stop them, but they drive off. And she's left with just the squad car and frustrated that, like, damn, didn't get to stop this. And thinking more about, because it's still the very next day, the 24 hours that Lorraine has given her have not yet elapsed. So she's still thinking about whether or not she's going to accept that offer.
Yes. Well, and it's also, I enjoy the juxtaposition between Wit, Indira, and the Tillman, Roy and Gator, and they like blatantly abuse their power in law enforcement or the guise of law enforcement. And it's juxtaposed with people who are actually attempting to serve and protect, for a lack of a better term.
Yeah, my friend was texting me about that today. Yeah, she lives in Minnesota. He says, yes, the Minnesota nice thing is very real. It's not exaggerated, and he can't stand it, but he says the accents are very fake and not real over there. But he did mention that it was interesting that this is really the first season of Fargo where they're actively vilifying like law enforcement, because usually in the Fargo show, law enforcement, much like in the movie, are the small town heroes, so to speak. And in this one, they're very much leaning into, no, the sheriff and all of his guys are bad people. To which I countered and said, well, I think they're making the juxtaposition that Roy and all of his friends like to play sheriff and pretend that they're law enforcement, but they're not really doing that. Whereas Indira and Whitfar and the two FBI agents who keep getting shut down by their boss actually do care.
Yeah. And well, they again, their responsibility is to the people and the laws of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And when it comes to Roy and the way that he's sort of set up Stark County, it is under the guise of serving a higher power. They aren't even responsible for the laws of the land as the FBI attempted to enforce. They're not really, like, Roy doesn't really care about the Constitution but he does care about the Constitution because it was bestowed upon Americans by God. And so and again, his piety is something that Karen, his current wife, is very she's bowing to. And as we see later, he is willing to almost Ezekiel 25:17 all over the place if stuff doesn't go his way, which is, we'll get there.
Yeah.
But I don't see Roy Tillman as being a legitimate law enforcement officer. I see him as being someone, he's a gangster who's manipulated the system so that he can take advantage and be the most powerful person.
Yeah, and that's what I mentioned to my friend, is that's kind of what they're doing this season. He's a gangster, basically. He's running his own little fiefdom, which is something they haven't really returned to yet, especially not in this episode, how he doesn't seem to be a true believer, like to the level that his father-in-law is. And I'm wondering if that juxtaposition in his character will come back into play later in the last two episodes or not. But you want to read Lemon Pie's comment?
Yeah, Lemon says we get to see Deputy Hottie change clothes. And the way that she does it is so casual. Now, first things first, I thought that the mistress was cute. When I first saw her, I was like, oh, she's not going to be around for very long. It reminded me of the lady at the end of Quantum of Solace when Bond walks in and then it's with the guy who was Vesper's ex, and it's like, you can go, and it's like, thank you. And she just goes, and it's like, okay, well, you're gone now. But yeah, no, we get without a care. Indira is just like, you son of a bitch, and she just starts changing her clothes, and it's like, go F yourself. This is my house, and I want you gone. Where am I gonna go? I don't care. If you would be happy to sit in the dark, if you didn't have to change a light bulb yourself, and if someone else did it for you, you would rather die than say thank you. So I'm glad I wonder if we'll revisit. I wonder if he's going to be like just gone from the series now, or if we're going to get to see him smacked in the face.
Yeah, I mean, I felt it was just ironically with how weird this season is with all this crazy stuff happening, even with a 500-year-old Sin Eater. I find that relationship between the two of them to be the most absurd aspect of the series. Is I can't believe that those two ever would have gotten together in any circumstance. Like, no. Like, you know how when people get, over time, they might get fed up with their spouse and they'll say all the bad things, but like, oh, but that's my Bob or whatever. Like, they'll still defend it. Like, she's not even ever once attempted to do that. And his level of stupidity, like, is that a real kid? I'm like, what? I don't. It's too much. I thought they went. That's really absurdist. So I could care less if we see him again or not. I don't think they were trying to make a point with her being stressed out and unappreciate all that. And I think they just kind of pushed it a little far. I mean, sure, some of those people out there definitely exist, but is it believable that somebody as bright and intelligent as her would go for that? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know, man. Like it's a situation. Hey, I'm no saint. Sometimes I've been the deadbeat boyfriend. Sometimes I've been the upstanding gentleman in the relationship. I think people fall in love, and then I'm going to facilitate you following your dreams. Turns into almost okay. I can do what I want, and no one's going to bust my chops because of love.
Yeah,
and that's the advantage that he took by infidelity. And it's a sad situation based on her drive and commitment to the job and how she's legitimately a good person. And he is, as she said, a lazy sack of shit.
Yeah. So meanwhile, we now get to something even more absurd, which is one of the funniest scenes in the entire series, which is Roy shows up for the sheriff's debate. And we see the challenger who was teased in the beginning of the season is standing at one podium. There's an empty podium for Roy next to him, and there's a whole crowd there. But there's three other podiums where we see the three debtors. And we realize that Danish Graves had their names legally changed to Roy Tillman and entered in the race, all on Lorraine's dime. And they're wearing the exact same outfit as Roy, the same cowboy hat. And they're literally there to literally echo everything Roy says, and in more of an annoying, funny, almost Dapper Dan type fashion. And so Roy gets up there, and when he sees this, the first thing he has, hey, is Jerry here from the Elections Commission? Jerry, what's going on? And nobody's saying anything, and Karen and the kids and her father are sitting in the front row and looking a bit kind of nervous, like, what's going on here, but trying to keep their cool. And the mediator, who is a woman, asks the first question. She says, Sheriff Tillman. And the others are like, yeah, I'm right here, Sheriff Tillman. And he's like,
Sheriff Tillman.
I'm Sheriff Tillman. And she's like, so how do you justify spending $500,000 of the taxpayers' money on these military-grade weapons that you've hoarded and given to the local militias? And he's like, oh, well, and people are kind of gasping in the audience, like, what's that about? And he's like, well, I don't really agree with your numbers, but, sometimes we need protection out here. And it's like, protection from what? And he's like, oh, and he's having a hard time defending it. And it cuts to Karen's father sitting in the front row, because, of course, he runs that militia, and even he's kind of nervous, like, how do they know about that, And
now the rest of the crowd is sort of chuckling as well because of the aping that's going on from the other Roy Tillmans. And then meanwhile, in the back of the theater or the auditorium, is Graves just sort of taking it all in as if mission accomplished, successful ruse.
Yes. And Roy doesn't want to really answer the question any further than he already has. And because these other guys keep aping him and hey, finally Dapper Dan with these big smiles on their faces, Roy finally just gets fed up, and he even at one point wouldn't allow the microphone to be put on, the lavalier mic to be put on. He's like, oh, they can hear me just fine. Well, now he's really frustrated. He shoves the podium aside and storms off the stage. And he's like, come on, Karen, and we're leaving. And they're all heading out. And then the mediator gets up, and she comes up behind him trying to ask a follow-up question. He just turns around and decks her. And that's where everybody's gasping. But then Roy's whole clique just kind of surrounds him and ushers him off the stage. And then it just cuts to, or out of the building, and it cuts to Danish Graves like a boss is just walking out the back door, hands in his pockets and his jacket flinging open, just like he has done it to the nth degree, better than he ever could have imagined. And he gets in his car and just drives off. And I thought, I can't believe that that's how Lorraine has chosen to buy the election. But at the same time, you're right. People were seeming more distracted from the aping that was going on and paying attention to the direct accusation about embezzling all that money from the people. And the fact that they even let him leave after he decked the lady is like, again, it's like the crowd is almost so won over into the cult of Roy Tillman that it's not really a guarantee as much as Danish thinks that he would still lose the election. He's just, because that's the power that he has over these people in this fiefdom.
Well, and Cinema Gulp says, but is it funny? And the answer is yes.
Well, the three imitators are funny on stage, the way they're, aping him in this Dapper Dan way. But then when he punches the lady, that was really, I couldn't believe he actually did that. Like, yes, obviously Roy's a bad guy, but he up to this point has been able to exercise a measure of self-control. Like, even we were talking in the hospital when he was checking, Nadine out of the building, he was able to keep somewhat calm. But here it was just like, oh Jesus, it's like, and that's where. But then when it cuts to Danish, there's that big smile on his face, and he's just so convinced that this guy's toast. And I'm like, that's bravo, you got him.
And lemon pie is correct. Point Danish.
Yes.
But the thing is, and going back to what Ben said, is it funny? The thing is it is funny because even with the aping, when Roy flips over his podium and everyone else, like all the other three Roys, flip over their podiums, it is funny. But the problem is, based on the character of Roy, him being humiliated like that is far more dangerous than anything else. So it is funny to see, but I knew. And then when he turned around and belted the moderator lady, I was like, oh, yeah. It reminded me of something that I had heard about the fears of men versus women. Women are afraid of violence and men are afraid of humiliation. That's a theory that I heard. I'm not a doctor, whatever. But that was the thing. And that is what we're going to get rolling into the last two episodes, is he's been publicly humiliated now. And who knows what that sort of blemish on his character in a public setting is going to do to his already very absolute sense of right and wrong.
Right. And like you said, if Roy's the butt of the joke, you better get out of the way, because that's how delicate and insecure of a person that he is. Because again, it's like he's not fully drunk on the "don't tread on me" Kool-Aid like the father-in-law is. He rolls his eyes at the prospect that you think you're actually going to use these weapons to take over what? And but then he also has the nipple rings, which made me think of that scene in No Country for Old Men where the two older sheriffs are talking about how they don't understand people with green hair and bones in their noses, meaning all the piercings and stuff. And it's like, Roy seems like a kind of guy who would criticize that too, but he's got the nipple rings on, which I'm pretty sure his father-in-law doesn't know about stuff like that. And yet so it's like you don't really fully believe in it. You're willing to pretend up to a point, but he clearly has his own piety and sense of righteousness about himself. But the fact that he's so triggered by anything, it's like like Lorraine said when she first met him. Oh, so you want freedom from all responsibility? You know what that is? That means you're trying to be a baby. That's basically what he is, and we're seeing him do that here.
Have a tantrum based on public scolding, and obviously the manipulation of the three Roys at the behest of Lorraine through Danish, like that is okay. Fine, let's poke him where he is most sensitive, and if we do pants him essentially politically, then it's over. It's done. He has no power once we show everybody that the emperor has no clothes.
Right.
Which is great.
It is. And maybe in the Fargo universe it works, but we've seen that happen. I'm not going to name names, but in modern politics where that type of stuff happens, and yet they still get all the votes. So we'll see
Yeah,
what
that's
happens
true.
to Roy in terms. Will he live long enough to see that? Because the election, they said it was only within like less than a week by
Mhm.
the timeline of the show. So,
Well,
so meanwhile, we cut back to the ranch, and Gator goes in to see.
hang
Um,
on, hang on, hang on, hang on.
what?
Meanwhile, back at the ranch. Okay, go ahead.
A title card. Meanwhile,
Exactly.
Dot is fastidiously sawing through the chain, trying to get it loose, and she hears someone coming, and so she hides the thing she's got hidden in the wall behind the bed, and in walks Gator. And you could tell from the look on his face and everything, he's not fully on board with this. He's kind of nervous, and he wants to know, what did you tell the FBI? She's like, what do you mean? I didn't tell him anything. He's like, come on, I saw you talking to him. But she basically says, look, I didn't tell him anything. I just gave him the slip. And then she tells him very sincerely that she saw his mother, Linda. And that, Linda's asking about you. She wants to make sure you're okay. And she really wants to see you back. You don't need to be with Roy anymore. You're not your father, type of thing. And he very, very just puts his foot down, saying he knows that's not true. But we don't know why he knows that necessarily. He thinks Dot's just being totally crazy now. And maybe Dot in this traumatic experience kind of forgot that the whole Camp Utopia thing didn't actually happen. And maybe she does for a second genuinely believe that she saw Linda. Because at least that's kind of how I was reading it, because she seemed to be really sincere when she was saying, oh, Linda cares and she wants to see you and wants to see you get away from Roy and all that. And he's kind of put off by it, thinking, oh, you're just a liar. You've been a liar your whole life, and now you're lying to me now. And you can tell he means it. Like, he knows whatever happened to Linda and knows that Dot is lying. And even though, like I said, maybe she's not, maybe in her trauma, she thinks it's that she did see her. So he turns to leave, and she's like, why don't you ever ask yourself why you weren't named Roy? He's like, what are you talking about? It's like, all the firstborn sons in the Tillman family through the generations have been named Roy, but not you. She's like, when you were born, Linda thought you were the most amazing, beautiful thing she ever saw, but Roy took one look at you and thought you were just some slimy lizard and were going to be nothing but a loser your entire life, and that's why he calls you Gator. And he gets really mad at her. He's like, you know what? I hope you effing die here. And she's like, you don't really hope that. He's like, no, I really do. And you could tell he's actually, any type of pity he had for her is gone once she said that about him. And as he's leaving, you could tell he's leaving almost with his head slightly hung in shame, because he knows that Dot's right about Roy. And nothing he can do will change Roy's opinion of him. And as we know, after what he did last week, his royal screw up, which he doesn't know has been a screw up yet, he's still thinking, oh, even if I tell him I killed Ole, that's even going to, and got his money back, even he's not going to care about that, because he knows that Dot is right. He thinks I'm a loser, and he always will.
Yeah. And that is, and it's, in terms of the thematics of the episode, is that you have Gator slinking away, dealing with the emotional uppercut that Dot just provided with, I know your mom loves you, and he's incredulous because I think that she's, dead. And this was all a hallucination, a fantasy of her remembering what had happened when she was captured by Roy. But he's walking away, and he's just like, stupid bitch. And that's when he gets in the car. But I think that and then it's interesting in Dot's perspective as well, not her perspective, but in terms of her actions, is that she says, your mom's alive and loves you. And he's like, you're out of it, which she clearly is, because she was just in the hospital and she's been
But it's
abducted
not just
several
that
times recently.
he doesn't really think she's out of it. He immediately jumps to the accusation that, oh, you're just lying now. You've always been one, like always been a liar. Like, he doesn't seem to give her the benefit of the doubt that maybe she is just screwed up from her, getting hit by the truck and being, perhaps so woozy on, drugs.
Yeah. Levin in the chat says, if he had contained himself, he could have laughed at the three mimics, and eventually they probably would have insisted on them stopping to have a real debate. But Tillman just lost it. He's got very little self-control. He is used to every little thing going his way. I think that you answered it yourself right there. In
like
terms
Lorraine said, you just want to be a baby. So what would be a baby piss him off? Oh, we'll just have these, rather than Roy being able to point out the absurdity of these three people aping him, he's just going to act like a little baby and throw a tantrum about it. And that's the simplest thing to do, and barely cost her anything. And that's all it took.
Well, and how dare anyone even question his authority?
Well, yeah, that's why he's got to order. It's not so much that he was upset about the other guy, the fact that she would dare question him about the money and all this kind of stuff, and ask him a real question. He can't stand that idea,
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And then and Lemon continues in the chat. Oh, I can't wait for Ole to get hold of Gator.
Yes.
I'm
So
with you.
Gator was after
So is Herc.
Yes. So Gator finally he drives away from the barn and he's heading towards the main entrance to the ranch, only to see State Trooper Whit Farr has followed them there. And he gets out of the car and they're immediately, clapping back at him. Oh, you can't come in here, blah, 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 private property. And finally, Whit just kind of backs off. He says, you know what? They're coming for you. It's coming, whether you like it or not. It's coming. And he's like, and Gator's like, what are you talking about? He's like, consequences. They are coming. And he's like, whatever. And he gets back in the car to leave. And Gator tells the two thugs, if he ever comes back here, you shoot to kill. And like, even it's getting to Gator now. And so Whit Farr just drives off in one direction. Gator gets in his car and drives the other direction. And then I kind of remembered, they mentioned the hospital that Dot was taken to was in Bismarck, where Ole is. And then as Gator's driving away all frustrated, we don't know where he's going, Ole suddenly pops up in the back seat. Now, there's still bars blocking it, so you can't, strangle him from behind, but Ole is there, and he's waiting to take his moment. And it's like, ooh, this is getting good.
Yeah. I had forgotten about Ole. And when he just sort of did the I was like, oh, shit's about to go down. But not this week.
No, that means they're going to have to do either he's going to lie in the back of the car for however long of a journey it is, or they're going to have a flashback, because certainly this episode continues to nightfall.
Yeah, it's a police car, so it's not like he can get out of there on his own.
Right. And so we then cut back to Whit Farr. He's driving down the highway and he spots Danish Graves at the gas station. And he pulls over, and Danish is trying to finish, not quickly, as he doesn't want to look suspicious, but you could tell he was trying to get back into his car when Whit stops him and tells him about Dot's predicament. He's like, that I saw them checking her out of a hospital in Bismarck, and yeah, she told me that she was fine, and so legally I couldn't do anything, but I was outnumbered and outgunned, and I could tell she really wasn't fine, and they're holding her at the ranch. And Danish he tries not to show it too much, but he really shows that he's completely beside himself. Like, yes, he knew that Dot was kidnapped earlier, and he tried to shut down the police because Lorraine wanted him to, but he had not put two and two together to realize that Sheriff Roy was behind this. He thought Roy only showed up because, oh, you saw that she got arrested and that was her real name and you tracked her down. He didn't. This is the first time he's really putting it together and realizing, oh, that's what Roy meant when he said outside the house that we'll meet again, just not like the way that you're thinking. And he's piecing that together in his head. And Whit Farr basically says, look, I can't do anything legally. My hands are tied, but you could probably do something because you're the lawyer. You're her lawyer, by the way. And so he's like, okay, yeah. So Whit Farr drives away, and Danish gets out his phone. He's already told whoever that, tell Lorraine the debate went fine. But he looks at his phone and sees that he's got a lot of missed calls from Lorraine's office. And he kind of debates, and he does something, which we'll get back to, which is perhaps the noble thing to do, but not the smart thing to do.
Right. Well, but I think this is one of the cruxes of the difference between wielding power that Lorraine and Roy have, specifically over Dot. Now, Dot never cared, but it was more with Wayne, but also Dot lulled Wayne into happiness. Not lulled him, but they were happy. She even says earlier on, I'm in love. And I think that it is a certain level of control that Lorraine and Danish have over Dot, which is manipulation, financial, just the nature of life, dickhead families. Whereas the control that Roy exerts is brute force, as we have seen, whether it be smacking someone around or shooting them. And we will see how that progresses when an underling of Lorraine, and as much as I love Danish, because he is a kid in the hall, Dave Foley's awesome.
Yes.
But you think you can walk in here and money me? No.
Well, we'll get to that when we get there.
All right.
So the next scene, we cut to Indira, and she's driving down the road on the way to her next shift, and Whit calls her up on the radio, and he's like, "Are you busy?" And she's like, "Oh, I just evicted an elderly couple, supposedly to protect and serve." And you can tell she's really annoyed by this.
Mhm.
And she's like, "Well, what's up?" And he says, well, and he tells her about Dot's predicament. He's like, "Yeah, I saw Roy check her out of the hospital in Bismarck." And, again, he tells the same story that he told Danish. And he says he told Danish about it. And she's like, "Okay." And he's like, "Yeah, I know that you're near where Lorraine lives. Maybe you could tell her something." He's like, "Oh," and she's like, "Okay, I'll got it for you." So meanwhile, we cut back to the ranch. Roy arrives home. His father-in-law is driving. They park the car outside the house. Karen and the kids are in the back seat, and Roy's just really cooling off a bit.
Seething?
Yeah, and Karen's like, "Oh, don't worry, honey. You'll get out of this. Don't worry. It'll not be a big deal." And her father tells her twice to basically shut up because
Mhm.
there's nothing you could say right now because this is bad. And then she's like, "You know what? It's that woman, that woman Nadine. She's the albatross. She's the cause of all these problems. If she hadn't come back, if she hadn't been here." And the way she phrases it, it's almost like Karen doesn't realize that Roy is the one who went out of his way to kidnap Nadine. Like, she didn't come back into their lives. He brought her here. It's not like she was antagonizing him and therefore he had to tie her up because of it. No, he went out of his way to kidnap her across almost 2 states to bring her back here forcefully. And Karen is being a Karen and oblivious to that fact and thinks that, oh, Roy's a nice guy and he's perfect and oh, it's her fault. And she doesn't seem to understand that Roy is the mastermind behind this. And yes, it's not
Uh,
all literally it's not all literally all of Roy's problems aren't literally Dot's fault, but certainly all the peripheral stuff of Lorraine is because of their desire to get her back.
but I
And
think that there was something that Karen said. She did say she's taking advantage of your responsibility and your piety. And
yeah,
this is why Roy is hell bent on, for poor choice of words, but actually hell bent on getting Nadine back, is because he made a vow, she made a vow under God. She has to fulfill that vow. It is a matter of upholding God's law. Like, this is, and Karen is saying she's taking advantage of you because you feel this responsibility to your Lord. And that is, hey, it's one of the tools in Dot's toolbox. Like, she knows how to sort of say, you know what, I've got things going on. And it's like, well, it's a lie. Anything you make, any responsibilities that you accepted after our vows, there were lies, there were mistakes, and these are all your mistakes that you have to fix. And then she's like, you gotta let me go. I will let you go when you beg me to stay, which is fucked up.
yeah, and
So
anyway,
I think that it's very, I think it's a way for Karen to get out of it, because let's not forget, Karen's been a sex toy.
yeah,
Karen is a role-playing sex toy who doesn't want to get beaten, and she is
but she's
still,
also a Karen,
well, by name.
but by traits as well.
Well, I guess she did marry a manager. Uh, so anyway, this is where we get, I'm a big fan of cover songs, but I thought this one was a little on the nose.
Yes, because I love this shot where he basically is taking what Karen said to heart, that Dot is the albatross. That
Yes.
is the thing that's the cause of all these problems. You need to solve this problem and everything else goes away. So he gets out of the car and they do this great medium shot of him on the long walk to the barn. And I think it's some of the best acting John Hamm has done in this series. Some of the best acting I've seen of him just trying to, as he's walking and working himself up on his way to the barn. And they played the cover song of Toxic by Britney Spears. I don't know who was singing it. And yes, it is very on the nose because she is toxic to Roy's fiefdom and threatening all of Roy's control, whether she's specifically the one doing it or not, because, again, Lorraine is doing everything on behalf of trying to get Dot back. But he is so
While
addicted.
also he is toxic by being that
But
toxic masculinity.
right, but in the context of the song is about somebody who acknowledges that they're in a toxic relationship, but they're so addicted to this person they can't let it go. And he is so addicted to the idea that he has to have this total control over Dot to fulfill her vow. Never mind his vows or what makes whether or not he should be a good husband. He cannot let that go. He needs to have that control. And so the toxic song kind of applies to him, but you're right, it's very on the nose. And the camera finally pulls back as he goes inside the barn, and the camera stays outside, and you hear her kind of yelling to Roy, and you hear him start beating her up inside the barn.
You know what I thought? I thought when that happened, I was like, oh, he's going to kill Dot.
Yeah.
I thought Dot was dead.
It's funny you should mention this, Lemon Pie. So what is the plan for Roy to have 2 wives? Well, this is the thing. So they cut back into the barn after he's beat her, and she basically challenges him on that. Like, what's your plan? You don't have one, which is a terrifying prospect in and of itself, because we've seen how Roy reacts when he doesn't get his way or when people make a joke about him. But what happens when he doesn't really have a game plan? Yeah. And it's not the plan for him to have 2 wives. He just wants her. He wants to break her. He wants her to concede defeat, basically, because realistically, even though he has pictures of all his wives hanging up in his house, they're not. He knows they're not going to come in and play house and be normal couple again. He knows that. And so his plan, like, he finally gets upset with her, and he tries to come in to beat her again, and she puts him in a headlock with her legs. Oh, she breaks the chain, tries to strangle him with it, and he runs around smacking her against the wall a couple times, and he finally just flips her over and slams her on the ground, and then starts quoting Jesus and how you have to listen to the lessons of Jesus and all this kind of crap as he's whipping the chain, and she's doing barrel rolls and jumps, avoiding in a really intense scene for the show. And basically the idea, he finally, during this fight, overtly implies, as blatantly as he can say it, that you're going to disappear like Linda did. Like, he basically admits to killing Linda, and the fight gets really intense. It's like, I was like, oh shit. And then
this is the second part of Linda's not real, is that she says Linda's out there, Linda's coming back, and it's like, oh, I know, yeah, you're gonna, or it's like, this is why Linda left, and it's like, yeah, Linda left, and I'll bury you right beside where she is, and it's like, oh, Linda's dead.
Yeah,
like this. Linda is last week's episode was a figment of the imagination of everything that has been crashing down around Dot's ears.
Well, her initial story of what happened and how she got there was still true. Like, Linda still brought her there because she was desperate to escape, and that was her way of doing it. But Roy didn't completely lose sight of Linda. He just seized her before she could flee and killed her. Which is probably what happened. And her whole thing at the women's shelter, yeah, she may have left to go to an actual women's shelter initially, and they helped her get a new identity, and she took off. But most of that didn't actually happen. It was her. It was the essence of her reality that we were seeing, even though it didn't literally happen. And so during this attempt at a beatdown, Bowman suddenly comes in and says, "Sir, the lawyer, Danish Graves, is at the gate." And he's like, "Okay, I'll tell him I'll be in." And he basically, tells her that, like you mentioned, "Oh, you're going to beg me to stay and I'll let you go." And she's like, "No, I'm going to make a promise to you, Roy. I'm going to kill you."
Yeah.
And he doesn't, like, he's just totally beside himself, and he storms out to go.
He cuffs her to the bed.
Yeah, he cuffs her to the bed and then leaves. But then before we get to see what Danish is up to, we cut back to Lorraine's mansion, and Indira shows up, and it's nighttime, and she's allowed inside, and Lorraine immediately comes out of the office to greet her and looks almost worried. And Indira's well, Indira takes the offer. She says,
Lorraine walks out and says, "Oh, so you've decided to take the offer. Good. Excellent."
Yeah, she says, yeah, and Indira's like, "I'm tired of, like when you're on an airplane and you have to put your mask on first, and I never get to do that." And she's like, "Yeah, okay, bad analogy." So Lorraine's like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Yes, she basically says, yes, I accept your offer, but that's not why I'm here." And she tells her that Roy has Nadine has Dot at the ranch, and she's held hostage there, and we can't really do anything about it, and Danish is there. And so she's kind of worried. Lorraine's now really worried, and ushers Indira into her office for what? I'm not sure.
Tonight.
Yeah, well, yeah, what exactly is going to happen? But then we cut back to the ranch. And again, it's nightfall now. We still haven't checked in with Gator or Olay to see what's going on there. But
Yep.
Back at the ranch, Roy's in his office, in his own private office at his house, and Danish walks in. The door closes. There's a big American flag back there, and he kind of looks at him, but Roy doesn't say nothing. Roy's just got leaned back, and he's got his hands on the desk. And Danish is, and Danish is saying that, look, you had a bad day. There's no way to get around it. That was humiliating, and you're probably going to be facing an assault charge, and the race is lost. But you know what? Those 3 Roy Tillmans, I can make them disappear as quickly as I made them appear. And Roy just kind of huffs some more because it kind of confirms for him what he suspected of who, because he didn't seem to notice Danish standing at the back of the crowd during the debate. No. And he's like, look, Lorraine's offer is this, which is not Lorraine's offer really. It's Danish getting the idea. And he says, look, if you release Dot to us now, I can make all those problems go away. The other Roy Tillmans will go away. The pending assault charge goes away, and you'll win your election. It'll be fine. You'll go back to the way things were before all this bullshit happened. It's a good offer, Roy. You shouldn't walk away from it on the table. And Roy is just, again, he's composing himself. Yeah, he's initially being smart. He's not unleashing him, but like you said, he's like, how he's basically thinking, how dare you come into my house and tell me how it's going to be and make me feel small by me having to walk away with this deal. And so he pulls a drawer open in the desk and sets this oversized revolver, chrome-plated revolver on the desk. And he's like, and like Danish phrase it, this is a really smart offer. It'd be smart for you to take the thing. And he's like, so tell me, if you're so smart, picks up the gun, shoots him in the gut. Yeah. He falls on the ground, and then Roy just comes around the table and he says, then why are you so dead? And just shoots him in the head. And it's like, shit, Danish. So we won't. So I guess the eye patch was just a fun little character flourish. It didn't really mean anything. And he's just dead. And it's like, oh, geez, I can imagine what Lorraine's going to do when she finds out about this. And initially, it cuts to black for an extended pause. And I thought the credits were going to pop up. Instead, it cuts back to Dot. And she looks outside and sees the windmill from her dream, the one where the cache was that had the note that said, I'm sorry, signed Lorraine. And these thugs come along with Danish's body, and they pull the big water trowel out of the way because there's the old
facade of being a watermill.
Yeah, the facade of being a watermill. And then they throw Danish's body in there. And as Dot is watching, having previously been calling for help after breaking the window, she realizes that, oh, that's why she recognizes it from her dream and realizes that Linda is buried down there with Danish now, and who knows however many other people Roy has had killed.
Well, he pours the lye on it.
Yep.
Which would be like a decomposition accelerant so that you're getting rid of the bodies. Maybe bones are still down there, but I don't know.
And this is where
I've never disposed of it.
It finally dawns on her that it's not just that Roy didn't really have a plan. She doesn't have a plan anymore either. Like, she's trapped here. And Danish is gone, and she has no idea if... Well, she didn't even necessarily know that it was Danish. I don't know if she could recognize that being as his body from her vantage point. But she knows now that for the first time ever, it doesn't seem like she has a plan to get out. Like, we've seen her worried before, but she's still... Like, even at the end of last week's episode when he said, I got you, Nadine, she still... was kind of keeping composed. Like, she didn't buzz the nurse and say, scream fire or anything. But here she's like genuinely scared, like really scared about what's going to happen. She knows that, oh, this is what Roy wants. He just wants to break me, or he's going to leave me in this barn forever. He's just going to kill me. He's not going to bring me into the house to play house with the other wife. It's over. And then it just, and then the credits roll. And it was like, geez, because it's like, yes, we've seen on the one hand the hilarity of the man-baby aspect of Roy, but also the terror of the man-baby aspect of Roy. And we've seen that, Danish, it was not, because usually we see Danish ruining people's lives on Lorraine's behalf, or, finally putting two and two together. And it's nice that he tried to do the right thing, even though I don't understand why when Danish put it together at the gas station that Roy was responsible for this, why he thought this would work. Because he knew from the plan that he set in motion at the debate that this guy is prone to severe tantrums and violence when he's barely poked. Like, what did he think was going to happen? Oh, I can just wander right into this guy into his home and just tell him that. It's like, really? It's like I didn't. It's like, yeah, you're doing the nice thing, but does it really make sense logically that he thought he could just, walk in there and do that? So it
I
is.
think again, I think it's a matter of your definition of civilization and whether or not you think working the system, bribing, offering the carrot versus the stick is the way that you get things done in modern society, or as Roy is rather biblical with his interpretation. And that's been apparent since his introduction with the wife who was beaten by her husband, and then he threw hot coffee in his face, and it's like the only way that people understand or will bend to your will is through violence. And now, after however many years it's been since Roy has had uh Dot or Nadine, it's like, you're not taking this away from me. This is my God-given right, and the wrath of God will be bestowed upon you. You can't use money to get yourself out of this. It's not, if you are so smart, then why are you so dead? It
Right.
doesn't matter how thick your checkbook is. It's a matter of how big my gun is. And it was a big gun.
Yeah, and that's why I was surprised that, because when, again, going back to the scene of the gas station, you could tell Danish was kind of surprised when Whitfar told him what Roy had done, because he was finally putting it together and realizing that, oh, that's what Roy meant when he said we're going to meet each other again, but not in the way I expected. He's the one who kidnapped Dot the first time. He's the one who was behind the burning of the house. He did all this. And it's like, well, you literally seen what happens when you barely poke the bear like you did at the debate. Like one of the was it Lemon Pie said in the chat that if he had just been calm and mocked the other Roys and debated, he could have had a legitimate debate and gotten out of it. But instead he didn't. And so when Danish saw that, it's like, dude, you're dealing with it. You've seen how insecure this guy is. What makes you think, especially since he dug up the FBI information about all the guns and all the weapons, the military grade weapons he's had there? It's like, what do you think this guy's all about? It's like, what did you think was going to happen? Because yeah, it's one thing to walk to a normal businessman, like Lemon Pie says here. Danish is used to being able to wander in as the big lawyer, negotiator, intimidate that way. It's like, yeah, he is. But with Roy, you could tell he was genuinely surprised again when he put the pieces together, realized that Roy is not just, simple talk. He actually follows through and does really scary stuff. And yet he walks in and it's like, and I'm wondering now, how is Lorraine going to react to the news? Also,
I think you can buy a militia is what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, and I feel that this episode also further pushes Olay out of the picture, because they teased early on this guy's the Sin Eater. He put the arcane message on the wall. He's coming. And yet with the events of this week, with Gator realizing that Dot's right, there's nothing he could do that is going to make Roy appreciate him. Well, then it really doesn't. I don't think it would make much of a difference if Olay did kill Gator at this point, because I don't think Roy would care, because Roy would just kind of use him as an embarrassment anyway. So it's like, unless Olay can think of a way to use Gator to get to Roy, because he doesn't necessarily know the nature of that father-son relationship, as bad as it is. So it'll be interesting to see, but I don't think Olay's just going to completely end up on the periphery, but it kind of seems it's where he is right now. So we'll see how that comes, because again, like I said, there's going to be either Gator was going on a very long drive somewhere and Olay is still lying down in the car, or something happened before the final scenes of the episode, and they'll have a flashback next week showing, what Olay did or didn't. Because like you said, he got in the car, but he can't necessarily get out. Or maybe he can't, because he seems to be, he got out of the house without leaving he left the bloody footprints up to the girl's bedroom, but there were no bloody footprints leaving the house. So again, it's supernatural, kind of like Varga. And so it's like, or like Malvo as well. Mm-hmm. So maybe he can just teleport out of the car. Who knows? So I am curious as to how that's going to come back into the story. Now that it seems Lorraine, and I do feel that Dot's time as a tiger has almost reached its end, because you can't have her be Superman and get out of everything easily. Somebody's going to have to come and get her out of there. And if it's not going to be Wit, because he said his hands are tied, and if it's, yes, Wit set the events in motion to get Lorraine to help out, but they don't know Danish is dead. And frankly, he doesn't even know that Danish went back to the ranch. So it's kind of up for grabs and again, if Dot, I can't remember if Dot saw him or she heard his voice to know that it was him, because she does break the window and start screaming for help when she realizes what Roy's end game is for her, and when
Well,
she's
but
out of options.
the gentleman who comes to the shed does say that the lawyer is here to see
Oh,
you.
okay.
So she does know that Danish is there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Then she does know it's Danish's body that they tossed down the well.
Yeah. Only one comes in and no one leaves. So it does. And also, come on, with that white shock of hair and that
I couldn't tell from the vantage point, but it is interesting that even in her dream, because I get that in her dream she would envision a women's shelter as being this utopic place, and they animate it that way for the audience, kind of like in American Gangster. They, in reality, when Frank Lucas brought his mother up from, I think it was North Carolina or South Carolina, to live in New Jersey, she was just living in a regular suburb. But Ridley Scott wanted to convey to the audience how big of a deal it was that for a black woman who's lived in Ku Klux Klan level, Carolinas for her whole life, to be moving up to the north. He wanted to get the audience to understand that, which is why in the movie they show her moving into this big Southern Belle type mansion. Similarly, in Fargo, Dot imagined the women's shelter as being this Camp Utopia, because in her mind that's kind of what it would be. And we don't know, and now we know where she got the image of the windmill from. We don't know why she would think Linda would be leaving her a cache of prize or something there to help her, because again, as we know now, she never did meet up with Linda when she escaped Roy the first time. It's like Linda was already dead. And so, yes, we get where she got the image of the windmill and the idea that that's more of Roy's cache, if you will. That's where he caches all the bodies of all the people he's killed. But I'm not exactly sure why she imagined that Linda would have left her something helpful there. But it kind of, So I get the juxtaposition where you want to convey to the audience how big of a deal it is for her to get out to a place like that. Whereas if somebody who's not in that type of situation goes to visit like a battered women's shelter, it looks like a really dark, depressing place, but it's really not for the people who are there, because they've gotten out of these horrible situations like the one we see Dot in for Roy.
My idea of it is that Dot's in full awareness as to what happened to Linda in that situation. Like, she knows that Linda is dead. I think that this is all something that is in the same way that she's turned on her fierce personality with Lorraine, is the same way that she has she has disassociated herself from certain things. Like, if she can be a completely different person with Wayne and Scotty, and how she goes for the Bisquick to sort of calm her mind when she is faced with the terror that she has experienced throughout her life. The reason that the windmill is there as part of her dream is that she is the evidence of Roy's malfeasance, for lack of a better term. I think I should use something more grandiose. Evidence of Roy's reign of terror over Stark County is underneath that false water receptacle, whatever it is, well. And it is something that I think at the end, it's like, yep, nope, every political enemy that Roy has had, we have Linda, we've got Danish, like, and whoever else who has stood in Roy's way. I think that that's, well, and again, I'm going to be completely wrong because this show is probably more clever than I, but I think that that's what it is. And then she's going to have to confront who she is. Like, maybe Wayne is going to find out that it is Nadine. Maybe, like, I hope for a happily ever after for Dot. I don't know what's going on with Wayne. I hope that Wayne, survives. I
also don't think, having thought about it for the last week, I don't think that Dot's going to kill Roy. I think somebody else is going to do that, because yes, this is an absurdist storyline, but because they've shown that they're not averse to really leaning into how horrifying Roy is, it would be too perfect to her to do that. After all, they do the whole "this is based on a true story" thing to do things which you normally narrative convention wouldn't allow you to do. or that a narrative convention people would say, oh, that shouldn't happen. That's not the way the script goes. And it seems almost like it would be too telegraphed if she does put Roy in the ground. And obviously, we want her to still have a happy ending. I think she will. I don't think.
Well, I need her to have a happy ending for Scotty.
Right, and that's what I mean. That I think she'll get that happy ending and eventually be reunited with Wayne and Scotty. But I don't think that Noah Hawley is going to go for a absolutely perfect feeling happy ending, because in a sense it would betray everything that's happened. Like most stories like this don't end up very happy, and so I think that maybe somebody else will be the one to put Roy in the ground. But at the same time, I almost feel like I would find it more like satisfying for Roy to go to prison, than because he's a man baby, rather than him just getting shot and put in the ground. As much as he deserves to die, I'd find it much more satisfying to see somebody like that dragged off to a prison and having to adjust to that, and just catching a bullet.
Well, and also for a quote unquote lawman, being put in prison is almost a death sentence unto itself. But that's also one of the things, if we've already established that Roy hates embarrassment, he doesn't want the disrespect, I want him to have that sort of stuntman. What's the name of Kurt Russell in Death Proof? Stuntman Mike. I want Stuntman Mike to squeal like a baby and, oh no, I want that from Roy. I want him to have that sort of floundering, scrambling, I gotta get away moment that Lundegaard has at the end of the movie, at the end of Fargo, the movie. Like, that's what I think would be like, that would be justice for the audience. Although I know everybody just wants, oh no, we should shoot him in the face. No, I want him to suffer. I want him to feel the humiliation. And if you kill him, I don't care. That's fine. If Ole does it, I think that Roy.
Now that you're talking about it,
what if Gator kills Roy?
I think Indira's going to do it, because
that makes sense, because she's also a victim of the toxic masculinity.
Right, and like she's not going to kill her husband or whatever, but she's accepted the job. It's like, okay, things will look up better for her. But Whit Farr I feel that Whit Farr's focus has been making sure Dot is okay. So I think he might be the one to get her out of it. But I think it makes sense if Indira is the one who, if Roy is going to be actually killed, arrested, whoever's the one that's going to do it, I think Indira might be the one to do it. Unless you're right, it's Gator, and it becomes like a David and Goliath type story, or like she gets to take down the sheriff, or he does. Because Ole, again, I liked the idea of that character, but in a sense, he's been on the periphery for so long, he hasn't really been that central to the story. And again, Gator is so much on the outs with his father that I don't think Roy would care if Ole killed Gator at this point. So I am curious as to where Gator was going and what Ole is up to, or if he's simply going to kill him, or will Ole go after the girls? Roy's twin girls, or kill the new wife, Karen. That's interesting to see where that's going to go. And then we still have the father-in-law and the bullshit. I also want Bowman to get his, the guy who kidnapped. Like, the guy at the hospital was a jerk, but you didn't need to kidnap him and get him killed. And him walking in on Roy trying to chain whip Dot, and he just no big deal type of thing. It's like, that guy somebody needs to put him in the ground pronto.
I think that a lot of those peripheral characters are just going to die in a shootout, because this is like a compound shootout situation where they discover the mass. If it is a mass grave, who knows? They seem very happy with being able to put bodies in that location. So
yeah, if Roy loses the election too, because any such offer is now definitely off the table, or it will be once Lorraine finds out, oh, Danish, what happened to him? And if Whit Farr, he may have gone back to the ranch. Well, maybe you're right, and the Tillmans will go and try and raid the mansion in Minnesota, which would be a Hail Mary, really. Because, like, what are you hoping to get out of that if you've already lost the election? But we'll see. It's getting quite exciting at this point.
Yeah, we're in the third act now.
Yeah.
All the stakes are raised. We have our protagonist at her lowest place. We have our villain in his most desperate hour, and some dangling plot threads. And Lemon Pie says Roy will be ended by zombie Danish from the graves.
That sounds about right. Danish graves.
And I agree. The next episode should be juicy, Lemon. Like, I think this is great. But I do want to say, like, it is so good to see Dave Foley. It is so good. And when he died, when he got shot, I didn't enjoy that, but I do love seeing Dave Foley act. And hey, good death scene. Every actor dreams of a great death scene. And that is a man who was walking in sure of himself, who wanted to make things right through their position of power and didn't expect that it would go south as hard as it would. And I thought it was glorious. I liked the scene that was with the soundtrack of Britney Spears' Toxic. I didn't like the use of it, but I loved the long one panning, like tracking shot. Is it tracking, panning? What is it? I don't know. Following. I'm not a filmmaker. But I loved and just seeing all the emotions play out on John Hamm's face as Roy. I enjoyed like everything about this is really engaging, and I am being like I'm juiced. I'm juiced for the last 2 episodes, and I'm pissed because the next episode after that one's over, I'm going to be like, oh, I want to see the next one. And then when the next one's over, I'm going to be like, oh, it's over.
Yeah, I'm expecting them to pull out the rug in some way because each of the 3 seasons that I saw have these very somewhat unconventional endings from what you were expecting, from the way the storyline's going. So I don't expect Roy to get away with it, but I also don't think it's going to be as clean cut as, it's not going to be as cut and dry as, I'm just going to kill you and we'll all be happy. So but I'm still curious as to where this is going to go because again, it feels like it's a situation where if Roy dies, his fiefdom collapses around him. So it's like I'm trying to figure out how that's going to go. That's what I love about this show is that because of the whole true story thing, as silly as it is to say it, they're able to use that to keep pulling the rug out from under the fans all the time. So, but I agree with Lemon Pie. The next episode should be very juicy.
Absolutely.
And I think this is some of John Hamm's best acting, period. He's so good as his character. Because on the one hand, he starts out being really funny and really kind of weird, but then he could be really scary too, both when he's totally losing his temper and even when he's trying to do that thing where he's keeping his cool, kind of like he was so good in this episode.
Well, I'm a big fan of John Hamm, have been since Mad Men, and I think that this is just more excellence. So yeah, I am a fan of Hamm. And I think this is a divergence, whereas Don Draper is sort of a selfish, pathetic character who is a manipulator, but he wouldn't he's always weaseled his way out of things. He's never used, Don Draper has never used brute force to get himself anything. He's always just been melancholic and selfish. And in Roy Tillman, it is something where John Hamm's charm as an actor is presented, but it is backed up with almost a ferocious childishness. It's interesting that I'll be nice, but if I don't get my way, and when Don Draper doesn't get his way, he just tries harder to ingratiate and be charming. And in this, it's, how dare you disrespect me? I will fuck you up. And that's where it seems to be going. And it seems to be how Roy's been dealing with his entire life. Is if you disrespect me, I will. And also, don't forget, this is generational. Like, talk about a Nepo baby. Like,
that's the thing too, because it's kind of like, again, we know that he's not completely drunk on the Kool-Aid, and I know from experience that a lot of these people, the don't tread on me types, a lot of it's just posturing and grandstanding. They don't actually do anything.
Right.
They'll roll over the minute they get even pushed a little bit. So, which is why I think that's also why Roy was rolling his eyes at his father-in-law, because he knows that, yeah, you're all talk, but you're not actually going to do anything. Because after all, they've had these military grade weapons for a long time, but what exactly are they doing? Like nothing. They're just posturing and grandstanding. And Roy is taking advantage of that.
I saw an episode of Yellowstone, and there was something where like a bunch of people came onto Kevin Costner's land, and then he started making them dig their own graves. And then and he was like acting like he was gonna kill them. And he's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna let you go now." Like Roy Tillman is almost like the Yellowstone Kevin Costner. If Yellowstone Kevin Costner was like, "Nah, fuck it, I'll kill you."
Yeah, I haven't seen that show, but I've heard it is also completely ridiculous in how it tries to present itself as being a drama, but not very accurate.
No,
I know
it's
that
a
a
soap
lot
opera.
of the I know that a lot of the Native American actors from that show say the only reason we're doing this is because we can't get work anywhere else, but this is completely inaccurate and totally ridiculous. But it's like, it's like a soap opera disguised as greater drama. But
but I'm okay with a soap opera
Fargo,
disguised as a crime drama. I'm sorry for talking over you, but I just to like in terms of that, if you want to have a soap opera that's kind of like Dallas for the 21st century, watch Yellowstone. If you want to watch a quirky crime drama that gets a little esoteric and abstract, Fargo is probably at least this season. Like this isn't even the entire series. It's just this season is almost like what if we turned up Yellowstone to 11? But that's the chat. Do you have any final thoughts on Blanket, episode 8 of season 5 of Fargo?
Yeah. Why do we think the show's called Blanket, or this episode? I didn't think about that. I should have been putting the titles down on all that. That's my bad, guys. I've been the one creating the titles for the YouTube videos next to the episode number. I should have been putting the episode names, and I just remembered that and decided to do it today. And I'm like, is it Blanket in the sense that the sheriff's being a crybaby and needs to go back to his blanket? I don't know. Maybe. I didn't really pick up on that.
I didn't either. Like I saw the title of the episode. I'm not 100% sure. If you are watching this on the rerun and you have any thoughts, put it in the comments below. We'll talk about it.
I did find out from reading more about the show that they've since named the old woman who unfortunately died last week. Munch's mom is apparently named Irma. I don't know if it's Irma Munch, but it's like, okay, that's something else. Yeah.
No, in terms of Blanket,
I just couldn't.
I don't know.
Yeah, that kind of got. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I was like, I really wish that there would be like a little featurette at the end of these shows, at the end of the seasons, or an interview where they would just come out plainly and say, like the first season was all the paradoxes, and you have to figure out how they apply to each episode. Parables, that's right. And the second season was more of that, like things like the gift of the Magi and stuff like that. And the third season was about, some of the episode names are about rules in the game of bridge, because two of the main characters are obsessed with competitive bridge. I don't know about season 4. I didn't actually look at any of the episode titles for that one. Whereas the 5th season, some of it's kind of like Trials and Tribulations is probably the most generic title that there's been, and that was for the 2nd episode. And then, like the first one, the Tragedy at Commons, was like, okay, well that's where there's enough. Like if everybody goes after a common resource, they're going to deplete it, and it ends in tragedy. Whereas if some people try and restrain how much of that resource they take for the hope of making it last, well, other people aren't going to restrain themselves, so it still ends as a tragedy.
Well, also a gathering place where everyone comes is called the Commons, and there was a tragedy there with the riot, and so I thought that one was fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah, the 3rd episode was the paradox of intermediate transactions, and the 4th episode was insoluble, basically, insolubia. That was another.
We'll have to go over them not individually, but we'll have to go over the episode lists on our finale show in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then the tiger for the 5th episode, the tender trap for the 6th one, which was the name of the bar, where the strip club where the guy was, and then Linda for last week, and now Blanket this week. So. Yeah, we'll have to think. Somebody, I'm sure, on Reddit has probably done a deep dive on that. And I
Wow.
keep looking each week, guys. There's still no answer as to what exactly the symbol was that Olay drew on the wall. The consensus is all over the place, though. It's just, unfortunately, that hasn't resolved itself yet. And to quote our friend, the Phantom organist, I want pancakes.
I want pancakes. Speaking
Yes.
of the Phantom Organist, thank you for being here, sir. I appreciate your presence. It's always good to see you, man. Herc, thanks for being here as well. You're amazing. I enjoy bumping into you everywhere around the internet. Lemon, you know I love you. DJ Play Nice, thank you. It's good to see you. Lovely Cherie. That was great
Yes.
for you to drop by. Cinema Gulp, as always, speaking of love, sweet love. Everyone should go subscribe to Cinema Gulp. It is fantastic. Years of content and great analysis and music as well. It's super fabu. And Herc 130 says, "Oh, we got Lemon saying thanks, Scotty and Kat," and Herc saying, "Yeah, good show, great recap." So I suppose until next week, I'm going to do my best not to be hungover because next Wednesday is my birthday. So next Thursday, I'm going to be an old man. And hopefully I will be on the up and up, but I look forward to it because this is my favorite time of the week. So, well, one of my favorite times of the week. Everyone, don't forget to subscribe to Anti-Derivative Jill. And Kat, is there...
I suppose this isn't a good time to tell you that on your birthday, at night at least, I will be gone at the movie theater watching the extended cut of Return of the King.
You know, that's the one I've never seen.
Really?
Yeah, it's the only one out of the Lord of the Rings trilogy I've never seen is the last one because I don't care. There's only one return, and it's of the Jedi.
What about the unofficial return of Khan and Wrath of Khan?
The Return of Khan? No, the Wrath of Khan is not a Return of Khan. It's the Wrath of Khan.
But technically, it's his return to the franchise.
It is, but it's not like, you know, it didn't know.
Yeah.
The Return of the Living Dead.
Yes.
Probably better than Return of the King. So, in the immortal words of the end of the show, Kat, I'll see you next week.
You betcha, yeah.